All right, so talking today with Carson Gross. And Carson, thank you very much for joining today.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I think, there's not a huge intro needed for you.
Hmm,
Most people who are listening to
sure.
this or watching this probably know who you are. But yeah, my first thought was just like big curiosity, just kind of like what's your day like in just your day-to-day work?
Yeah. At this point, it's pretty chaotic. So I teach at a university, and that is really great because it's flexible and I don't have to go in and, you know, be there at a specific time. But I have a lot of other things that I'm doing. I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm the president, or I guess it's called the chair of the local youth baseball thing. And
Yeah.
man, oh man, the last 3 weeks of my life have been like, I feel like I've been working 40 hours a week on just youth baseball because it's the end of All Stars. And so there's regionals and there was the state tournament and all that. And so
Oh
that has
man.
ended up taking up quite a bit of my time. And it's summertime, so I'm off for my university, so I don't have an excuse. So everyone else has, to do
Nice.
stuff, and I've got to actually, but I do. So let's see, what's a typical day like me for me look like? Like I get up and I do like typically get on Twitter right away. Like when I'm waking up, I just like go and like check in and like I'll often schedule some tweets for later in the day. Like I wake up and I have like a couple ideas around jokes or something like that, and so I'll schedule those. I hate the scheduling UI for the. It's actually better on the phone than it is on the desktop. But so I'll do that, and then it's very chaotic. Like if I have time to work on HTMX or something like that, I'll take a look at the bugs and try and see if there's any that are obvious and need to get addressed immediately. I just released a new version of the paperback, and so I've been doing a fair amount of like marketing around that and just trying to engage people and get them interested in that. Boy, it's super chaotic though. I don't know if I have a typical day at this point, which is kind of bad for me. Like for a long time, I had like a normal 9 to 5 job. And I'm this last year with HTMX getting so popular has been really, obviously very neat in many ways. But I do kind of miss the 9 to 5, like just go in. It's 9 o'clock, start your job. It's 5 o'clock, the job's done, and I
Yeah.
don't feel like I have to be quite so on all the time. So maybe things will settle down here in a little bit, and we'll get into a more normal situation. So I don't know if I have a normal day.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's like at least now if baseball has taken over that part of
Yeah.
like a large portion of your life. So yeah, I like, I did a volunteered to be assistant coach for my daughter's softball team. And that was like the limit of my participation because like I love,
Yeah.
I used to play baseball. I love it. And
Yeah.
like I know, a couple of years ago, noticed like the pitching, nobody was really showing them how to pitch. And so it's like that's such a
Right.
huge part. It's it's 10U. So it's like the first
Yeah.
time they're pitching to each other. And it's like
Yeah.
nobody was doing it. So I was like, all right, I can handle this. And like even
Yeah.
just that, like assistant coach doing a specific thing on the team that is and I also keep the books, but like
Sure.
it is yeah, like I don't think I could do more. So, like I understand taking on the whole league. It's like
Yeah, it's just I feel like it's a lot like anything else though. You do it and then you just figure it's like having kids. Like, oh, I could never have kids because like, or I could never have a third, second or third kid, and it's like you
yeah.
figure it out. So I don't necessarily want to recommend it because I'm pretty exhausted at this point. But I feel like anyway, people can do stuff. Like when you sign up, I've kind of told my wife this, and particularly if you're a perfectionist, like you just kind of have to accept like a lot of the stuff isn't going to get done that well, but it's going to get done, and like that's okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I think that's for me where I've kind of gotten to mentally for just a lot of stuff, even like HTMX at some level. Like there's so much, like we'll talk about out of band swaps in a little bit here. Um, there's a lot of stuff that I look at and I'm just like, or the implementation, if you're going to complain about the implementation or whatever, like fine, like, but you just, okay, this is good enough. It moves,
Yeah.
it moves society forward
It's
in
like, hey,
some
it's
way.
pretty good,
And
okay?
like,
Like, yeah, that part's maybe a
it's
little
pretty good.
something. It's pretty
Yeah.
damn good. Look at this. It
Right.
worked.
Yeah, it works. It does a thing. Like we had a baseball season here. Like that was good, you know. So
Yeah.
good.
At least now, if you don't have the classes, I like can't imagine doing like professor working
No.
as a professor and mixing in like all the other stuff. But I mean, like my day is pretty chaotic, but I have kind of just my own basically web development type thing. So I try to
Right.
keep it at a 9 to 5 as much as possible, um,
Yeah. I
if I
really am
can.
missing that right now. Like I feel like I want that back. There's always pros and cons to everything, and I've been like I do consider myself very lucky to have been as involved in baseball with my kids as I have been because it's been a way for us to really connect. You know,
Yeah,
my
it's
oldest
awesome.
doesn't play baseball anymore, but it really was a big part of our lives for a long time, and that's one reason why I'm so passionate about. I talk about it obviously almost as much as I talk about HTMX. I've been very thankful that I've had the opportunity, the flexibility, like now going on a decade to be a big
Wow.
like to coach and to be a big part, like travel with them when they need to travel and stuff like that. But like when I was younger and when I was in the Bay Area for a long time, like I had a much more traditional job. And there's maybe it's just nostalgia or whatever, but I kind of miss that, like going into a spot. And then the other thing that I really miss, and you don't really get this as a professor, is although I'm starting to do research and maybe it'll show up there is just the collaboration with people face to face. Like I collaborate with
Yeah.
people online, and that's great, but it's just not the same as sort of like face to face collaboration. Even just talks like this, like it's cool, it's great to talk and everything, but it's not the same as being in a same physical space and being able to whiteboard and stuff like that. So I don't know, maybe it's probably just nostalgia when I was younger and I didn't hurt so much, but I feel like that right now I kind of long for that
Yeah.
environment.
No, I get that. I sometimes think about, I'm like, man, it was nice going into work and like having a couple buddies and like I learn all this new stuff I never would have learned, like just about
Yep.
life and about music and like, the
Yep.
people in your office, you party with them, it's good.
Yeah,
But then like
lunches.
logistically, I'm like, would I really actually want to drive into work every single day
I
right
know.
now? And I feel very lucky that I don't have to, but
Yeah.
I also miss it. Like
Yeah.
just
I know it's
sometimes.
yeah, it's I don't know what to do about it. I don't know. Trains, I like trains. I took the train to work for a while. That was cool.
Yeah, but
But
you're not teaching remotely, right?
we
Like
live in
when you're in the
America, so
university.
no trains.
Yeah.
Unless
Yeah.
you're in a very specific location, I guess.
Yeah. But I mean, you're teaching in person, right? Like you're not
Yeah, I
like
teach in
remote.
person, and so I get to interact with students, and that's good. But it's not the same as like a peer-to-peer relationship. I am again, I'm
Right.
starting to do more research, and so hopefully that'll like come out of that. But then research like academia is kind of clicky and like it's not as when you're at a company, you're just trying to get stuff done, and so it's I don't
Ideally.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, ideally, that's true too. And maybe a big part of it is just the company that I happened to be in, which was a company called Guidewire. And maybe I was just there at the right time in their growth cycle. But I learned so much at that company so fast compared to what I learned in school. Like I went to school when I went to grad school, I wanted to know how to make a programming language. That was like my big thing. It's like how do programming languages work? And when I came out, I
Wow.
barely understood it. And but then I went and worked for this company, Guidewire, and I worked on. They had a custom programming language called it was called GScript and then Gosu. And I was like, I learned more in like 6 months there than I learned in all of undergrad and graduate school combined. Like I learned about recursive descent. There wasn't a good book at the time on recursive descent, so you kind of had to learn it from like just anyone who happened to know it. And so we were very lucky. So maybe it was just like right place, right time. But I do look back very fondly on that time in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like for some people, just the practical experience of working on a project, like you just learn so
Yeah,
much more. Because I mean, I did a CS degree too, and it was like, I don't regret it because it's like, I don't know, I know I learned a ton, but yeah, like
yeah,
the last 2 years I was there, like, I don't know how many classes I actually used a computer. Like, I'm like,
right,
I was doing like theoretical stuff and I was like figuring out inductive reasoning, and it's like,
right,
as a like just in general, like I tend to be more like, okay, how can I use this and
right.
for some of that stuff, I loved some of it, but it wasn't like, I
Yeah.
did learn a lot once I started programming on my own.
Right. Well, and I think what like something you're touching on there is something I definitely believe really strongly as a professor too, which is that theory should come after practice. Like we do it the other way. Like
Yeah.
here's all this theory and now go write code. And that's not the way to do it because you don't have any context.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
should practice first. You should build software first and then like okay, now like let's talk about why that was slow or like let's talk about recursion, right? Now that you've used it for, say, recursive descent. And so in all my classes, I try to have very practical projects where you write a lot of code so that you see the like the practice. And then, there's, I think it was Aquinas was like, what is it? Like existence brings essence into being, I think is the saying, something like that. But like, it's
Aquinas,
like
the philosopher?
the philosopher guy, yeah.
Or who? Okay.
And I like that's really resonates with me. Like this idea that like doing like seeing looking at stuff and then building abstractions from I say this in the Grug Brain essay too, where it's like don't start with like high level abstractions, like build stuff that actually does stuff, and then looking at those, now maybe you can like get up at a higher level and see an abstraction that makes sense that covers all that. Maybe not. Like, don't feel bad if there's not something there. But go the other direction. Academically, we've always like the way it's set up in computer science, anyways, is you start with theory and then move to practice. I guess you have a little bit of practice, like right at the start where you learn Python or whatever. But then very quickly you move into these things where like you don't know how to write software, but like here's
Yeah.
big O notation, and like here's like
Yeah.
this stuff that's like I don't know, like here's how
It's
to
like,
another. Good.
no, just, and some people like really connected with the big O notation stuff and that. And like, I had friends and I was just like, man, like, you guys are smart. And like, I'm not like, I got nothing against like, people who go down that route. One of them actually ended up going to work for
Yeah.
Google pretty early on. And I was like, this guy's
Sure.
going places. That's great.
Right.
But like, yeah, I was like, it's not exactly going to help me in my
Yeah.
next project.
Right. Well, and the thing is like all that stuff is useful, but I just think again, for a lot of people anyways, maybe not for the people that are just naturally gifted at computer science, but for a lot of people, seeing the practice first, like what is a for loop? Like how do I write a for loop to do something useful? Right? Like and then okay, like what is like let me use recursion for something useful, and then we'll talk about the theory. Right? Like that
Yeah.
to me is like a much better way for a lot of people. Not for everyone, it's always context dependent. There's going to be people that like really thrive one way or the other, but I think for a lot of computer science people, it's a disservice to give them all this theory. A good example for me, just from my like career, was hash tables. So, I'm in grad school and I kind of had an idea of what a hash table was, but like we did a whole like 3 weeks of like the theory and implementation of a hash table in C or C++ or something like that. And I just was like, what is this guy talking about?
Even just
And
the
then I
name
got,
hash table, it just
yeah,
sounds
and then
like, oh, it's
like,
confusing.
I don't know what this is. And then I went out into the real world and started programming, and I'm like, dude, these hash tables are awesome. Like, this is awesome. And so what I think, like in an ideal world, I think it would have been far better for me to be like, here's a hash table, and like, let's do some useful stuff with a hash table. Like, what can you do with a hash table? Okay. Like, isn't that useful? Cool. So here's how you implement one. Here's all the details. Here's what's going on the inside to make this really useful
Yeah.
thing like work. And then that would have been way better for me, like as a student to understand, what's going on. So I don't know.
It's such like
Kind of
a
beating the dead horse
small,
here, but like I just feel like practice before theory is often very good.
yeah, it's such like a small theoretical change too. Like you're still teaching
Yeah.
the same stuff, and
Yeah.
it totally speaks to me because this is how I always learn. Like I'm not learning until I'm trying something out, and then it's
Right.
like then this theory stuff actually clicks. I'm like, okay,
Right.
yeah, I get
Exactly.
that. I think that was, the first time I came across, some of your stuff, including HTMX. Before this, Grug Brain was the first
Right.
time I kind of like came across that, and I think that stuff. I don't know if it was from working in companies or from whatever. Like, I don't know what it felt like a lifetime of pain, like condensed into this sort of essay and, essay with humor, I guess I would say. And I just like that spoke to me on a lot of levels. And I think, looking at like the whole sort of body of work of like the Grug brain, the HTMX, like it's all, and probably your teaching, which I haven't been in class to, but it sounds like
Yeah.
it's kind of going towards this similar place of like,
Yeah.
I can't quite describe what that similar place is, but it feels very internally cohesive to me.
Yeah, I really like when I heard that quote, existence brings essence into being. I really was like, dude, that is what I'm that's what I'm trying to say in my own idiotic way. Like do stuff
Interesting.
and then the like music of the spheres perfect, conceptual stuff can be built on top of that. I think it was particularly in my teaching, that's definitely like just for me, it's always been, if I don't, you can't just tell, I'm not that person that you can tell, like, here's the theory. And then I'm like, okay, like I didn't understand grammars until I wrote a recursive descent parser. I mean, I kind of knew like how to make the, symbols work and sort of what they did, but
I
I
don't even
didn't,
know. What do you mean by grammars?
like an EBNF grammar of whatever Bacchus normal form grammar, like what a like the way you would write a formal grammar for a language. Like I didn't understand that until I wrote an actual recursive. I took the class at Stanford. Like, come on, like,
Yeah.
I'm not that dumb. It's just it didn't click for me until like I wrote a recursive descent parser, and I'm like, oh, it's grammars are recursive because look at the recursion right here, and like, okay. And that's one reason why I'm such a huge fan of recursive descent is like it shows you, like you see the recursion, and you
See,
can
I
step
have
through it and debug it.
I have
So
not had that moment, and every time I have to work with recursion, and there was a bunch, especially the inductive reasoning
right,
classes, but it's like every time I had to get into it, I had to
yeah,
like move into a different my headspace because I just
sure,
it didn't. I would say it never quite clicked in terms of like the real usage. And then when I did get it, I was like, oh man, this is great. This is awesome. I
yeah,
love this. And then a week later,
right.
I'm like, how did that work again? I'm like,
It's
it's
gone.
like I had to keep
Yeah,
resetting.
yeah. I think I've just written enough and like I teach the programming language class here. That obviously helps quite
Yeah.
a bit because you just get used to it. But that book, Crafting Interpreters by Bob Neustrom, like that's a fantastic book. And if you really want to understand how to write a language, especially the first chapter, it's in Java. You could do it in Python or whatever. So it's garbage collected, so you don't have to worry about memory management and all that. And I think that's and it's an absolutely excellent book. That's like the peak independently published book. Like it's such a gift that he gives it away for free online. So
Oh, nice. Yeah, I feel like I haven't quite gotten like I'm still in the phase of my life, and maybe I always will be, where I use the tools that people
yeah,
build. I have never been a source diver, or
yeah,
to edit stuff. I've actually like I've thought about it with HTMX. I'm like someday I'm
sure,
gonna look into the code and see what's going on there, but I'm just like,
yeah.
nah, not now. I think I'll just figure
Not
out how to use it.
today.
Yeah, I'll figure out how
I
to use
did.
it for now.
There's a video I did a walkthrough of the source code. That's
Oh,
up on
really?
the essays page. I think it's down at the very bottom. I walked through it. I walked through the 1.0 code, but the 2.0 code is almost the same. So, and it's not that
Nice.
bad. I feel like even if you don't edit it, just being able to set debug breakpoints and like the five places that matter is like that's something that if you become an advanced HTMX developer, one thing I hope, as opposed to maybe React, I don't know React very well, so I can't say for sure, but
Yeah.
I hope HTMX is something that most developers who are using it feel like they could set a breakpoint in the code and be like, oh, okay, that's what's going on here, because it's just not that much code at the end of the day, and there's really only a few spots that matter, and they're pretty obvious. I think if you look over the code base. So I would encourage anyone who's an HTMX developer to take a look at the source code and feel like it's not magic. There's a little bit of some crazy stuff like the way we gather parameters from the DOM, trying to match the way HTML works normally, and like the history support is a little crazy. And there's a little
Right.
bit of weirdness around the way we do swaps so that we make CSS transitions work. But for the most part, I mean, it's an AJAX call at the end of the day. So you can
Yeah, I
find
mean,
where I knew up an XHR and set a breakpoint there and watch what it does.
I guess I don't even know under what circumstances I would feel the need to do like because I'm like I don't know like I guess if something wasn't working, but I would just be like I guess that
Right.
doesn't work. Like but it's like all the stuff that's there as far as I've used, I mean, it
Yeah.
works as advertised. So like,
Right.
I would never sort of like feel the
Yeah,
need to
I had
source dive
someone
at this point.
today. Yeah, I had someone today on Twitter complaining about the queuing. They were trying to use like some advanced queuing stuff, and they were complaining
Right.
that it wasn't working to spec. And I wouldn't be shocked if there's bugs in there because the vast majority of
That
people
looks
just
so
use them.
tricky.
Well, and most people use normal, like just like queue one event and then that's it.
Yeah.
And so
Or
I wouldn't be
replace
surprised
or
if there's bugs
something.
in there. So I was like, just set a breakpoint or, fork the code and put a couple log statements in there and see what's going on. But it's not, it's not magic. There's nothing magic about it. Actually, I do have to say the queuing code is a little crazy. So
Yeah,
I
there's a
wouldn't be
little
shocked if
magic in the queue.
yeah, it's a little hairy, but I thought, I mean, it is a little hairy, but like the queuing code's only, I think, about 15 lines. And I got it all right. And I'm like, okay, don't touch anything. Right.
Yeah.
As far as I could tell, it was right. Like, I was like, okay, don't touch anything. And then, wrote the
Yeah.
test and then worked according to the test anyways. So, but, you never know. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that was one I was like thinking about trying to figure out how to do an example of it, and I was like,
yeah.
I might save this one for the future. Even just setting up an example is like,
Yeah.
it's getting complicated. How
I
fast am I
really
going to
think
click
like
here?
the only thing to me that makes much sense is just drop. Like if there's a
Well,
request in progress
well, what
and
about
another one comes,
replace though, right? So I
yeah,
replace is
replace.
the only one I use because it's just like, okay, if I'm sending a really slow one, I just want,
Okay,
usually this
yeah,
is like lookups. Like I'm doing a lookup and I just want my latest one. So that replace is like the only one I've used.
sorry, you broke up on me there.
Are we in video cutting mode yet? Uh,
Yeah,
maybe. Okay, so you mentioned this is a topic that you added. OOB swaps.
yeah.
Are they
So
a good idea?
I don't know. I don't know.
So I can tell you my experience with them if you want, and you can tell me whether that's a good usage of them.
Sure.
Okay, so let's see. Basically, the best use I've had, so I've recommended OOB swaps for like unusual situations
Right.
where you are like you have some part of the page that you want to update, and this is like my default understanding of it is like, let's say a notifications thing. You just
Sure.
edited something. Every single page you want something to pop up in the notification. So like when you return your data, whatever it is from any page, you also include this little like hx-swap-oob with the ID of your notifications thing, and it puts your
Hmm.
notification into there. Does that
Sure.
feel like a pretty good usage of it?
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I would probably lean towards an event, like trigger like a toast event and then catch that on the body, just because that's what I've done before. But the problem that I have with OOB is that it was one of those like theory precedes use. Like I didn't need it, but I had people talking to me saying like, "Hey, what about this?" And I was like, I don't know. How does this look?" And then that kind of was it. Like that was the extent of the design of that feature. And so I've always been a little uncomfortable with it because of that, because I've just never used it heavily myself. So
Okay, so let me tell you, I'll just say briefly
yeah,
why I think X swap the swap OOB. I immediately was like, oh yeah, I got like this is cool. I got this.
okay,
So before like back in the day, before I learned how to use any framework, so this is like I was
hmm,
using straight PHP.
right,
I was wanting to write stuff from the back end because I was living in the back end world. I just was like, okay, this is like, let's say 12 years ago. So really even
hmm,
before Laravel existed. And what I, and then we had a project manager come in who was big on, we're making an SPA. Like we're turning our project into an SPA. And I was like, okay, I don't really know how to do this, but we're going to do everything with Ajax. And
right,
so he was very client heavy. Like he wanted to kind of build something with the client. So I was like, okay.
right,
So I had this idea that I was going to send everything from the back end.
hmm,
And the way that I did that was I set up a router in the JavaScript, like a single file that just all it really did was scan the new HTML, find the IDs in it, and
hmm,
send anything with that ID to where it was supposed to like no, send that HTML to the IDs that were specified. So I mean
right,
that sounds to me like an HX swap OOB. Like that's like
yeah,
relatively similar. So from the
Yep.
back end, I had a shell in my front end. My client was just like a shell. And then a back end was just sending everything. So literally the entire site, and this is like a massive site used by thousands of people, and it was like tons of lines of code, was using hx-swap-oob, like some version of that, some really
Right.
primitive kind of version of it. And it ended up being, I would say, like a mess, like kind of a disaster. Like I
Right.
overused it like it was like way too much, too hard to tell. Very nice from the back end because you could
Right.
just kind of set it up, but trying to debug is probably what you would imagine if you set up a site yourself with
Yeah.
hx-swap-oob as your only form of like
Right.
communication with the client.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, and that's, I feel like there's some spooky action at a distance with it, like to an extent. It's just this weird, it just feels tacked on. So, but people use it and people love it. It's like HX Boost. Like I'm on both sides on HX Boost. Like, should you use HX Boost? Alex, who's on the core team, he kind of hates HX Boost. And I'm like, I get it. But then some people love just like, oh, just throw HX Boost on there and everything feels faster and it works, most of the time, as long as you set up your styles and scripting like beforehand, it works great. And it's not as elegant and polished as like Turbo Links, for example, but and certainly not as like polished as like Live View in Marvel. But it works, and it's useful. So I've just kind of like left it in there. So I'm not a purist in for stuff like that. I'm not a purist. I'm a purist about some other stuff, like as far as like HTMX, like the core idea is like abstract hypermedia controls, like that I'm a
yeah,
purist about. But this other stuff, I don't mind like having some, like people like, oh, this is going to be ugly. I'm like, yeah, everything's always ugly. Like big software projects are always ugly. You're not going to be able to architect your way into like making a 100,000 line project like fun to deal with because it's just not. You can make some good decisions along the way, like have an event bus where it makes sense in the system, and like there's some real good cut points that can help a whole bunch, but there's going to be some gronkiness.
yeah.
So which it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't use HX Boost that often, but I'm not sure if it's just because it's a lot of the stuff that I've been sort of adding HTMX to is like the site already kind of exists. Like I work on a lot of big projects, and so I'm just
Right.
taking a page that's already. I'm not sort of rebuilding a site from scratch using HTMX. I might use HTMX
Right.
Boost for the HX Boost for that more, but it's
Right.
like taking a single part of the site and completely redoing it with
Right.
HTMX. That's kind of my main use right now.
Right. Well, and Alex's point is that browsers have gotten actually really good with like link navigation, and especially once view transitions come for like multi-page view transitions, which is like that. I know the Chrome people are pushing on very hard. Like once that hits, it's like, well, okay. Like the big thing with HTMX Boost is like, in my mind, first of all, it like cuts down on the load, makes things a little faster, but you also have CSS transitions now
Yeah.
between the pages, which can be super useful. And so, like, okay, if that advantage goes away, then maybe HX Boost gets less compelling, which is fine with me. Like, I would love it if HTMX like slowly shrinks in what it has to do to like help the web, like be to help the hypermedia approach of the web be like a viable solution for good enough solution for most applications or for many web applications, I guess.
Yeah, I saw. It seems like you've sort of been shrinking the core over the years, or sort of not a big push to add in every feature that people may have requested and that kind of thing. Sort
No.
of the opposite, maybe.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I saw that post, and I'm blanking on his name right now. You mentioned the guy who was
Alex.
working at Facebook. Not Alex, but
Oh.
yeah, the
Oh.
guy who was working at Facebook who was like, every single line of code you put in here, is it worth it? Think about
Yeah.
that before you do it. And it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah. What was that? Oh, geez, I'm blanking. This is one thing that's horrible about getting old. My ability to remember names is completely evaporated. Like to the
uh,
point I don't know the names of some of the kids on my baseball teams. I'm just like,
yeah. Well,
okay,
that gets hard. A lot of them have the same names in your
they do.
defense.
They do. How many Stevens can there be in your life? But um, yeah, and like so just to like rip on that some more, like for HTMX2, you mentioned in the notes, like we didn't do much with it, or maybe I mentioned it. We didn't do much with it. Two obvious things that we were really thinking hard about adding. One was morphing, so morph swaps. And
Yeah.
have you ever used morphing?
Like separately from HTMX?
Or just with HTML in any capacity? Have you ever, like,
I
I
guess
guess
I'm not.
Live
Oh,
View does morphing, right?
yeah, I mean, like I said, like I don't dive into the code of these, so I'm
Okay.
like I use I'm a big Livewire, like Laravel Livewire was kind of my
Livewire,
first
that's what I
introduction to
meant.
this, and they use Morph DOM, and I think the guy wrote his
Yep.
own version of Morph DOM,
Yeah, he
and
did for sure.
yeah, so
So that's an obvious thing to add. It's a different sort of swap. And made that library Idiomorph, which is I think is an improvement on the art of morphing. It's an improvement over Morphdom, like the original, which Morphdom was really the original, I think. And then it just like nothing really changed for a long time. Like people rewrote it to make it a little cleaner, but it was the same algorithm fundamentally. And so
hmm.
what I did is I created a library called Idiomorph, and that uses ID sets to try to do better matching. It uses basically information from children to make decisions about what nodes match up with what, and but you have to do that. Like that's an O of n squared problem in general, and
Hmm.
so Idiomorph uses information kind of intelligently from children about IDs, basically, to make the morphing more consistent, and so that you don't, because the big thing when you're doing a morph, for listeners that don't know, all a morph is you take one DOM and some new HTML and you change the DOM with as few changes as possible into that new DOM. So you like hook up new elements and like just make it match this stuff that's coming from the server. And it's I believe this is similar to what like the virtual DOM like algorithm probably looks like, but I don't
Right.
understand the virtual DOM stuff. But anyways, um, so the big thing in the DOM is that if you can't reparent nodes, you can't take a node and move it from one place to another place in the DOM without it resetting that DOM node. And when I say reset, what I mean is like you lose focus, video elements stop playing, like any other sophisticated element, an iframe will reload or whatever. It just nukes that node really badly. And so
Hmm.
that's why these morphing algorithms came along in order to like minimize, okay, like let's try and minimize how much we actually really change the DOM so that things like focus and videos and like all that stuff like just stays in the, so we mutate the existing DOM to match this new HTML, but those elements that don't have to move don't get moved around. The problem with that again is that like the general algorithm is O of n squared, and so it's very slow. And so Morphdom took sort of an O of n approach to it. I think I don't know, it might be a little bit. I haven't done a formal analysis of it, but
You are
it's
using that big
pretty.
O stuff though.
Yeah, I am. I'm
In the
sorry,
end, it
but
does end
it's
up
linear.
does end
It's
up
linear
working.
with the size of the DOM. Let's say that,
Yeah.
or close to linear. With the size of the DOM, and but the problem with that is that it doesn't look down. So if you have an important child that one match could preserve it and another match couldn't, like it doesn't know about the children. And so that's what Idiomorph does, is it sort of populates the IDs up the chain so that they can know, like, okay, like you've got these IDs below you, I've got these IDs below you. Is there an intersection between those two sets? If yes, then we're probably a good match. That's basically the core of the algorithm. And so that improves the morphing. So anyways, all that's to say, like I had this thing. I think it's a good idea. Idiomorph's a pretty good idea. And I was like, oh, we'll add this to HTMX, and this will be like the killer differentiator between HTMX and these other libraries because it uses Idiomorph. But
Right.
then Idiomorph, it would probably like increase the code base size by 50%, and a lot of people probably don't care about morphing. And I was just like, oh, God, as much as I want to do it, I can't bring myself to making the code that much bigger and then it's sitting there. Now, and I say that as someone who's not like a Nazi about like code size, because typically it's downloaded once and it's cached forever, from a CDN or from whatever. So it's like, it's not that big of a deal, but it just felt like, man, I just can't have this like big chunk of code that's like really would have dominated the HTMX code base like living in there when there's a plugin, when there's a plugin system that works perfectly fine. And if someone wants to use Idiomorph, like they can just use the Idiomorph plugin and then it all works. So I don't know. I don't know if that's like it was a good idea or a bad idea, but that's the conclusion.
Well, wait. So you're not using Idiomorph at all, or are you using it as a plugin?
It's usable as a plugin with HTMX, but it's
But I mean,
not.
are you using it as part of the core?
I'm not using it in the core. It's not
Okay,
part of the
okay.
core. Yeah. So but I went back and forth on that for 2.0 because like you feel like 2.0, it's got to have a big feature. And I was like, okay, it'll be Idiomorph. And then the other thing I was like, it'll be head merging. Like we'll start pulling in the head and doing basically like merge in head changes.
Oh
And
yeah, which I've seen people
right.
talk about it. They use they use an extension now to
There's an
handle that.
extension for that. And I was like, okay, we'll make that. That'll be the big feature. And then I was like, no, that's out too, because it just got too big and ugly. And I'm like, this is too much code for stuff a lot of people just don't care about with HTMX. It wasn't even like a size argument so much as like the extension way is fine, and like most people don't care about this, and it ends up dominating the code base. Like it just doesn't look right in the code base. Like it was literally an aesthetic decision on my part.
Well,
like it just
okay.
doesn't look right here.
Yeah. So I might diverge from you on that a little bit because I feel
Yeah.
like actually it depends. Is there something with Idiomorph that is legitimately you just can't do with using whatever other morph plugins? Like that'll be the differentiator for me because the size, I mean, really, I think what you're saying about you download it once and we're talking like 33 kilobytes versus like 42 like it's like I don't know
Yeah.
what the actual sizes are, but I mean, to me, those are minimal. If there's some killer feature you can do with
Yeah.
Idiomorph that you just can't do otherwise, that's
Yeah.
easy win.
Yeah, but if the plugin's available, like, do you care if it's in the core or not? Like, if you
I
need it,
see.
you can reach
I
for it.
don't usually,
There's
I look
complexity
for
there, though.
plugins if
Like, you
I'm
have to know
forced
about
to.
that plugin,
My
right? Like,
preference is usually,
yeah,
to find it in the core. But obviously, I
kitchen
know there's a
sink.
problem with that. You don't want it to get too big and stuff like that. And I get that. But,
Yeah,
it depends. If there was some like just kind of like pretty common like use case, like I would definitely
yeah.
lean towards doing the,
Maybe what
you
I
know,
should do is like build a kitchen sink HTMX that's got like
I
the
love it.
core like 5 plugins that we recommend, just all bundled up into one thing. I wonder if that would be useful. Maybe I'll look in it. That would be a good, like I can just create like a separate project that depends on HTMX and the other things, and then just release that as like, okay, if you want all this stuff, like here's the version that does that for you.
Yeah, and it's like still a CDN, just one of the options for the CDN on the
Yeah.
page. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I would probably go for that. I mean, I might, maybe it depends on the project,
Maybe
but
you should do that.
yeah, I mean, whoa.
Hey, hey, maybe you should do that.
The
Let's
classic
talk.
open source maintainer line.
That's right.
Oh,
Maybe
I don't
you
know.
should
That's a
do that.
great idea. Oh, I love that
Yeah.
idea. Why don't
Yeah.
you get started on it?
Yep, exactly. No, I love it. I love it. Now we've got a project for you to take on it. Perfect.
Oh man. Yeah, I don't think I actually have anything open source out in the world just because
Yeah,
that's
and then
it
well now
just
you do
yeah.
HTMX kitchen sink. Let's go,
Kitchen
baby.
sink. Yeah. I'll have to find some killer feature I can do with that nobody else can, and then it's just like
Yeah, no, I mean
resell
just
it.
I think just getting like the core like there's another one that's another plugin that's you can use attributes to say like when you get a 400, put it here, like right. So
Yeah.
you don't have to script. You can just sort of specify how you want to handle things, and that's from a core guy on the team too, and he's advocated moving that into core, and I'm pretty close to like breaking on it. But just because he's such a good programmer. But that's another thing that I think, like, if you made a kitchen sink version of HTMX, it would definitely go in there.
Yeah, actually, I will say with the errors, I've had a hard time, if something just doesn't work on the server set, I'm like,
Yeah.
and you sort of get nothing back by default. You get
Yep.
like an HTMX error, and I have had a hard time with that. So if there is an extension that adds that, like there probably is. There's probably some sort of error extension that I haven't found
Yeah.
yet or something. But
Yep.
yeah, I don't know
There
the
is.
kitchen sink Kitchen sink. I could try that. See what it's.
That
I'll
was
see,
a
see
great
how
idea,
bad the
Laz.
hit is. Yeah.
That was a great idea that you had,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
you're going to implement.
Okay, so I just looked up my email. So the guy's name was Makinde
I lost you
Adiegbo.
again. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. What about now?
You're good. You're back.
Okay. So I just checked my email because the guy's name with that quote about keeping the thing who worked at React was Makinde
Yeah, McKinney.
Adigbo. Yeah,
Yeah, and what
Makinde.
was the
So
name of the project again?
so he had worked on. Let me see. So I sent him an email. Primer.
Primer.
Yeah, I
Primer.js.
yeah I had asked him about that on an email, and he actually responded. He wrote back,
Yeah.
and I was hoping to get him on the show, but he said he just wasn't going to be able to. He's doing
Yeah.
stuff that's unrelated, and he like didn't. But he did say that Primer. Let me just say here. He said, there's a lot going on at Facebook. Basically, like there's, it's complicated. And he
Hmm.
said, I think React grew from the needs of the ads team and some others for really complicated needs for UIs that are used by advertisers and other specific audiences.
Sure.
So,
Well,
'cause I think
I've
it sounds
never
like there
bought
really was
the
kind of like,
that like people say,
a
oh,
discussion
they
on how
created
to sort
React.
of go forward in Primer, like I don't know, people who didn't follow that thread, but Primer is like a version of kind of hypermedia first that they experimented with at Facebook in 2012 or something. Is that how you
Yeah, even
understand it?
earlier. I think
Even
20
earlier?
like 2008. Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
I think even earlier. And the thing, I've never bought like the story around React was like they needed to add a comment to a comment box. Like that's like the story I've heard anyways. Is like it was like, oh, they wanted to have like nested comments. And so they had to build React. And I'm like, no, they did not absolutely have to build React. Like that's a perfect use case for hypermedia. Like I don't buy that at all. So it's much more plausible to me that it was something like a complicated ads UI where they had to maybe do drag and drop or something like that back in the day because the adding a comment to a thread on the main Facebook website just never made any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's
Like,
a totally different just the divergence in like philosophy of like his stuff and just that
yeah,
that type of quote of like, watch out for every single line you add versus
yeah.
like the 6 megabyte JavaScript applets that everybody installs to go to CNN.com. It's like
I know, I know. Well, and you can go watch the talk. It's still on YouTube. It's if you look up Primer and McKinney, you'll find it, and it's a banging talk. It's like great, It's like he was a little bit more focused on using the existing like infrastructure syntactically of HTML, like using the rel attribute and so forth, and which is good in some ways. Maybe like HTMX should have done that. I don't know. But it's just like, holy smokes, like talk about someone that like I totally agreed with. And if I had been at Facebook, which I never would have been, they never would have hired me. I interviewed at Google. I actually interned at Google, and
oh really?
I had a boss, and that boss could not take a joke, and so I was like the wrong I was the wrong I was the wrong dude for that group because as
Yeah.
my Twitter indicates, I tend to be pretty unserious about stuff, and I'm afraid I got blackballed from Google for that internship. But a lot of
Yeah.
smart, good people there. But Facebook, similarly, I just would have been like, I don't know, guys. Like, I feel like I don't fit in here. It's all good. I ended up at a good company, so Guidewire was really a good thing for me.
Yeah, they give you a little more leeway in how you conduct your personal and business affairs.
Oh, I think they were more desperate.
Yeah.
They just needed
Yeah,
they
there's
just
no
needed warm bodies that understood Java, so they were like, okay, we'll take him, whatever.
there's no better pathway for giving leeway than a
Yep.
desperate company.
Yep.
I like it.
They were building insurance software, so it took a lot to. It wasn't. People weren't exactly like jumping out of graduate school into
Yeah.
the insurance software business.
Bring your own excitement to this job.
Yep.
Like,
Which we did. We made our own programming
yeah.
language. It was
Nice.
awesome. It was a ton of fun. That was a great company. So
Yeah. I'm a big fan of not doing things for developers. Like finding industries outside of people who do development because it's just so much
thousand
better.
percent.
It's so much better.
1000%. You can go
Yeah,
like that's. I tell my students like you could go to a bank or like a farm manufacturing company and be an absolute legend at that
exactly.
company.
Or you could just be like
Or
some loser who,
yeah,
yeah,
you can go to Amazon and like fight with like some of the smartest people in the world over like just L whatever, like, conversations, and then get like backstabbed by some thing that's going on at a level like you don't even comprehend. You're just like a bug that gets stepped on and you don't understand what happened. Like like or just go work for John Deere or Cat or something like that, and
yeah.
you'll be you can be a beast there.
No,
Costco is another company. Like I had a student that was like, he was out struggling to find a job, and he's like, "Oh, what do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, do you have any like parents or friends?" He's like, "Yeah, my like I think it was uncle or something like that was like at Costco." I'm like, "Dude, that's there you go. Like you're okay. Are you gonna be working on like maybe mainframe tier technology? Maybe, but like it's all the same stuff, man. It's for loops and if statements and like whatever." Like,
yeah.
go there. You've got the contacts, and like you're going to be an absolute, legend at that company if you can, figure it out.
No, it's so true. Yeah, I'm in the legislative world a lot, like state
Okay,
legislation, and it's
there
just
you
like
go.
there's not that many people in this world who know
No,
programming and who are on top
yeah,
of the latest tech and stuff like that. It's like
yeah,
I don't know, it gives me a pretty big advantage, and so it's
yeah.
like
Don't tell anybody. Don't
I
tell
know,
anybody.
yeah, I'm
Oops.
editing this part out right now.
Yeah, you
That's my
should.
next, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Teach a
yeah,
man to what is it? If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, now you have competition. So don't do that.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so let me see. We can choose anything here, but let's. What do you think about optimistic UI? So, like, there was a big discussion about optimistic UIs. That was a big part of, I
Yeah,
think, at Big Sky. It came up a few times, and it was
sure.
sort of in the like Twitter sphere for a while. And
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, I mean, if you were to take the premise that optimistic UIs are like, I guess first of all, like, are optimistic UIs compatible with HTMX in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could. I think like I want to do an extension for optimistic UIs just to see like what it would look like. Um, I think because what is that? So first of all, what's optimistic UI? Like you accept user input and then you show them the updated state on the client before it is synced to the backing data store. And why do you do that? Because perceived performance is better. So what are the advantages of that? Perceived performance is much better. Like people feel like things are happening it's much snappier. What are the downsides to it? Well, you're telling the user this is updated before it really has updated. And, like if they, depending on how it's implemented, like they could be convinced, for example, that they purchased a plane ticket. That's the example I always give. Like, okay, I purchased that plane ticket, and then for whatever reason that request ends up failing. Like, how do you notify the user of that? And so some obvious ways to do that with HTMX would be like, okay, you specify either a template tag, maybe with some dynamic behavior or maybe a JavaScript function or something like that to be like, okay, given the request, generate some UI that will insert into the DOM immediately as like, congratulations, you've saved that. And then wait for the request to come back. And if that request HTML is different in any material way, then swap that in and maybe fire an event to notify people or something like that. That's the way I thought about it. And good for some things, probably not worth it for other things. I think a lot of people like this is like way more complexity than is necessary for them to build reasonable UIs. But I don't know. I've got like my own take on what's acceptable, unacceptable web UI that might not gel with might not gel with everyone. So I
Right.
don't know. I feel like you could definitely do a plugin in HTMX. The next level down, which I've seen some people talk about, is to actually work against a local data store like a SQLite database that's replicated to a
Oof.
backend. And so people are doing that like in memory type stuff. And I think that eliminates some complexity in your UI. Um,
Yep.
but then it adds complexity because where the synchronization is happening is so low, it gets harder to say, like when something goes wrong, like what do you notify the user? How do you notify the user of that in a coherent manner? And so I don't know too much about that approach, but I know some people are pursuing it. And I think for some, just like everything else, there's going to be some apps that is a killer feature for. Most of the apps that I work on, I don't think it's worth it. Even the more limited version than an HTMX plugin might give you, I would probably do that as like an intellectual exercise, but I doubt I would use it very frequently because I just don't care. Like if it's like to
Yeah.
me, like once you show a spinner, like unless you're dealing with like really chaotic network environments and like you're designing for that, like once you show a spinner, like I don't know, is it worse for a user to think it's been saved and it hasn't, or for them to be like, man, this is slow? Like I don't think there's a
Right.
huge difference from like as far as like things being screwed up goes in between those two states. But people disagree with me, and I'm not gonna fight with them about it. So
Yeah, and I think that the approach you were talking about with the SQLite database and the local data, I feel like maybe that was what was happening in like Warren's talk at Big Sky. Warren Buffering, yeah, he was building a mobile app, and it seemed
mm-hmm.
like the part of the idea was that you are just using the local, but then you're using some sort of advanced sync. And to me, that
Yeah,
definitely, some things, especially his example, you're out in the wilderness, you want it to work
right.
locally first.
Yeah,
Most of the stuff I build, it would be an absolute nightmare to try to
right.
do a local version and then sync everything. Like syncing
Yeah.
is harder than just having your single server.
Well,
Um,
and I also think about like how do you visually represent it, right? Like, okay, you're offline. Like, what changes haven't synced? Like, do you have a UI for that? Is that something that's easy to get out of the data store? If it's a generic SQL data store, probably not. Like, you have to keep track of all that. I think. I don't know. Maybe their data
yeah,
store is designed for that, and then okay, that's cool. Like but it does seem like a fair amount of complexity to me. But I definitely, the phishing app is what Warren was demonstrating, and I think it makes a lot of sense. If you're designing an app to be useful offline and online, totally. But even with those, you do have to like, what is your how do you do conflict resolution when there is if
yeah.
is there conflict? Is there conflict? Like, can conflicts occur? Like, do you design it so that there can't be conflicts? If there are conflicts, like, what's the UI? Because visual conflict resolution is a pretty advanced thing to have to build, and so I don't think you want to build that for like a stupid CRUD app that's just not. It's going to be used like by people that are sitting at desks all day. Like that doesn't strike me as like a good trade-off. But then
Yeah.
for other apps, it's the right thing. So just it depends, as always.
No, I thought there was a funny moment, and Aaron Francis. He's kind of on
Yeah.
Twitter. He's in the. I'm in the Lar. I just do a lot of stuff with Laravel, so he's big in
Okay.
the Laravel world. But he just made a quick aside, and I was like curious his take on optimistic UI. And he was like, yeah, I was talking to my friend in the JavaScript world about optimistic. And he was kind of like giving Aaron some like, oh, but how do you do this? And Aaron was like, I just told him, like I don't care about optimistic UIs. And that was it. That was the end of it. That was it. It's just like
Yeah.
doesn't matter for any of the apps I work on. Doesn't make any difference to anybody. It was just like, and it wasn't. He wasn't saying it in a negative way. It was just like, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's just kind of move on.
Nobody cares. And that's, it's easy to be flippant about it, but it's also like, I feel like, there's something to it, but also like people, I think, in my opinion, tend to overemphasize this. Like, how dare you take more than a second?
Yeah.
Like, they just
Well,
clicked update, man. Like, I'm fine when it takes a second to update. Like, it's doing something. Like, in fact, I'm a little like I get a little weirded out when I do an update and it doesn't take a little bit of time because I'm like, did it
yeah.
really save?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Exactly. Like,
You get this with like sometimes like the settings UIs now. Like, there's no save button. Like, you just change it and you're like, okay, are we done? Did we
right.
did we do our
Do I need to quit and restart
do I need like
or?
what do I am I are we good? And to me, like having a save button that like changed color, even if it took 200 milliseconds or whatever, would be like, okay, cool, we're done here. So I don't, it's not to say there aren't subjective advantages to the optimistic concurrency stuff, but there's also, for me anyways, like maybe I'm just an old guy, but I don't mind waiting when things update. Yeah, when you're trying to
Yeah.
read and click around, like it's really nice when it's fast. That's a different problem because that can be solved with prefetch, which there's a plugin for prefetching, and HTMX as well. So, but for updates, I don't know, optimistic updates. I don't want
Yeah.
to say oversold, but not something I'm like super bummed HTMX doesn't have an out of the box solution for. But I would, I do think a plugin for it would be interesting just to see what you can do, see how simple
Yeah.
you
So,
can make it.
so the biggest argument I found, because like I literally have been working, been doing programming for 20 years, and I've never felt like the need, like the absolute, like, oh, this isn't going to work unless I have Optimum. This never happened.
Right.
So it's like, from my perspective, I don't really care that much. The big push that I would think is, I have seen these sort of arguments online that go basically like, can, let's say we use a server side rendering. Like,
Yeah.
people are making this big decision. Are we doing client side rendering? Are we doing server side? And just like they have to make this decision before they have all the information. It's hard to just
Yeah.
like test two things. So they're making this decision. And the argument that I've seen is a client side sort of proponent will say, you know, if you use server side rendering, you're giving up on blank. Like, you no
Hmm.
longer have optimistic UIs as a possibility. You can, and there's other things that I think they think you give up with server side rendering, like transitions and CSS, like that you actually don't, because of
Yeah.
HTMX, and the browser does a nice job. So, but that part where it's like, the response is basically like, why would you ever use something if there's a limit to it, to what you can
Right.
do with it? So then we'll just use the
Right.
client side because there's no limit. So that
Sure.
would be my biggest argument for having some optimism solution. I just don't see it
Right.
as a real need.
Yeah, I think, but there's always the Yagni, you aren't gonna need it argument, which is like has a fairly strong pedigree in computer science. Like, don't architect for stuff you don't know you're gonna need. And then also,
Yeah.
there's the islands of interactivity pattern, which like I didn't even come up with. That's just like the SPA world started talking about that, where like, okay, like we're just gonna have a normal MPA, and then we'll have islands of interactivity in it. Is like, okay, you're not committed. Like, if you use HTMX, like one of the good things about HTMX is that it's not you don't have to do the whole system in it. You can do parts of the system in just plain HTML, and that's fine. Use HTMX just for like a little bit of it. And similarly, like if you've got a page and there's a part that it makes sense to use a reactive thing with like optimistic concurrency, then just use it for that. Like, hopefully the reactive
Yeah.
solution that you're using is like lightweight enough that it doesn't require you to rework the entire, like, I just don't get this, like, you have to buy into all this crap so that you can use my tool for like, like,
Yeah.
okay, like, there's just forms that we just want to save. Like, you don't even need HTMX for that. Like, I don't understand why I have to bite off this huge amount of infrastructure for that. And like, if you got a better solution for like an island of interactivity, then good. That's good. The mother of all HTMX demos, um, which was a demo of a Python. They had a Python backend that was Contexte out of France, and I just got an updated essay, like kind of a review, like looking back on it from the guy who did that talk. And he had mentioned like, oh, there was a spot where we needed a rich text editor, so we ended up using, I think he used Vue or something like that for a component, like wanted a component. I don't know, but
Yeah.
he ended up not using HTMX for it. And I'm like, thank you. Like, you didn't. That would have been a really bad thing to implement in HTMX, and like that's the way to do it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
what's the problem we're trying to address here, and then use the appropriate tool for that.
Well, it's like the tool itself, I feel like HTMX, it's kind of matches the, your sort of work with everything, work with everybody, mix, it's
Right.
kind of the ethos of it. Because like, I mean, my experience, I have a bunch of different projects, and I don't think I have had a project yet where I can't go in and just kind of throw in HTMX. And that's really not the case for other libraries. I think like
Right.
Alpine is one that I've been able to do that with. Vue
Right.
is a little easier, but a little easier than like going full sort of, React or something. But
Sure.
it still takes over. You have to
Right.
basically build your virtual DOM. and then more and more of the page has to move out, and view is growing and growing and taking over more of your. So, I think the fact that HTMX kind of can be dropped in, I think it's unusual,
Yeah.
and
Well,
even
and
in old projects.
I credit that focus on generalizing hypermedia controls for that. Like the idea of like, I'm not going to try and solve everyone's problems. I'm going to take this existing idea and extend it. And like that existing idea is a pretty good one. And there are some obvious extension points to it. And so I think that focus is, because like, oh, like Livewire, for example, right? Like now the back end has to know about the front end. And if you want to do it with like a different backend, now you've got it. Whereas like the HTMX approach is pretty stupid. And I know Livewire guys come in and they're like, dude, this is retarded. Like, I don't want to use the R word, but this is not smart. let's say this is not very smart. This is not very sophisticated, to use the Svelte guy's name. It's not a sophisticated, HTMX is not sophisticated in like conceptually. I think the implementation has some, somewhat sophisticated stuff going on at times, but
Right.
the core ideas themselves are not sophisticated. And that makes it so that it's just this dumb tool that sits there and issues HTTP requests and put the stuff in the DOM, and that's it. And it's like, yeah, man, that's pretty dumb. Yeah, but you can actually get a fair amount done with it. You can do some interesting stuff with it, and that makes it play well with other stuff. And making the events, like being really event friendly, I think is another important aspect of the library, because that really lets it integrate with other, an event bus is like the only way I know of to really have like sort of a hierarchy of things that are interacting with each other without knowing about stuff in advance. So I think, I'm glad to hear that, because that's definitely something, it was a goal with HTMX. Like, let's just play well with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, the only things I've had trouble with are like other third-party JavaScript things, just because they always have to be reinitialized every time
Yep.
you do like a partial page update. It's like you gotta
Yep.
just remember to do that. And that's kind of a gotcha for me, even like
For
having done it a
sure.
bunch of times where I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
how do I initial, I'm using
Yeah.
select to or something, and I'm like, okay, I
Right.
need to
Yep.
remember now that I'm using
Yeah.
that.
That can be a little tricky with history too. Like you have to deinitialize it before the history snapshot. Like there's stuff like that. That's
I
like,
just
oh
don't, I
man, like
don't, I don't let them use the back button,
just don't
It's
use
too
the
much
back button.
trouble. Yeah, like it just,
It's like
I,
I always say that like one of the miracles of the web is that users stopped expecting undo.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we
it's
we
funny.
we don't even have like we don't have to implement undo anymore. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much undo sucks? Like you've got this like two-way linked list of like mutations. Yeah, it's like awful. Like holy smokes. Thank goodness web programming has allowed us to not have to deal with that. And now we've like gotten to the point where we're like we're not even going to give you the back button anymore. Like
Yeah.
that was like 1/1000th of what undo was, and we're just we're too complicated.
Yeah, I do see you put a lot of work into the back button though. Like the
Yeah,
history. Like I mean,
but
I
it's
haven't.
hard.
It's
It's
hard.
hard
It can.
for exactly the reasons you outlined, like DOM state, like when do you snapshot, and like, what does back mean when you update a partial bit of the UI? Like you can put, if you want to have some fun, go set up like an iframe based, which is like website with like a couple of iframes that you can like have links, because links can target iframes. There's a target
Right.
attribute on links, and you can target it and like click around on the links and then like hit the back button and see what the browser does, and it's pretty funny. It's like I'm not the only one
Yeah.
who has, and you are not the only one who has struggled with what does back mean here.
Yeah. Yeah, and like honestly, most of the time it just doesn't matter so much. I appreciate
Yeah,
that there are some tools to kind of like, but like if I'm working with partials, I'm usually not. I'm just like when they refresh the page, they'll start over. It's okay.
right.
It's
They get
okay
what
if they
they get.
haven't loaded all the little things that they've loaded in the
The mighty
meantime.
refresh.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I know we're over an hour, so I want to
Okay.
respect your time. Can I ask you one
Sure.
more question?
Yep.
Okay, so this is just like a general question about memes and
Yeah.
logistics. Like,
Yeah.
so it's like many people, I have imagined a world where I'm like, okay, I can put this into a funny meme. And
Right.
I go and I'm like, okay, here maybe I have an idea of like which of the different topics of memes I have. So I do like a Google search for like, okay,
Right.
like midwit meme blank or something like that. And then
Right.
I like find a crappy version of that and screenshot it because I can't download it. And then I'm like, by this time I've already spent like 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, now I need to go and figure out. So anyway, this is my horrible process for this. So I imagine that over the years you have built your own process. So do you have like a folder with a bunch of PNG memes? Like, how does that work?
It is exactly the process that you have outlined.
So you still do the terrible thing that I was hoping you'd have a solution for?
Yeah, no, I just like, oh, this meme would be funny. I probably have a bigger backlog in my head because for whatever reason, like my head is like, it is an art that I am very passionate about. And so I'm able to remember.
Damn it, I lost your audio.
Make associations. Because I think that's a big thing with, oh, you good? Am I back?
Yeah, you're back now. All right, so you have a big backlog in your head.
Okay. Yeah, and I've always been good at like association stuff, like in school and so forth. And so I think that helps quite a bit. Like, oh, I see the relationship, and so I've gotten very good at finding like memes, especially old dead memes. I use Imager a lot, man. Imager is pretty good.
Imager,
for me.
okay.
Like, Imager, is it Imager? I think that's what it is. Like the whatever the main. Yeah, whatever the main meme generator. If I find it on there, I'm like, oh, sweet. I don't have to like copy and paste it into. I use Photopea, which is an online editor. If you ever heard of Photopea, it's like a 1995 version of Photoshop, but online as a JavaScript web app.
Okay, I've been using Pixlr.
I use Pixelmator on the Mac. Are you on a Mac or
Mac? Yeah.
Yeah, so Photopea just because it's there and quick and I like have the muscle memory, like I'll often open that up and do it there. Although the fonts are not very memey, but they have good like when you need to select and mask out stuff. They've got all the 1995 Photoshop tools, which is like the level that I'm at.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right there with you.
Right. And so I use that when I really need to like edit stuff up a little bit. That's what I'll use. But you're doing it correctly.
God damn it!
I'm sorry. I
can't believe I'm already doing it the right way. That's terrible.
You're already doing it. As far as I can tell, you're already doing it the right way. So I'm sorry. Sorry to report.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't gotten, my only hope for ever being able to kind of get that good at that is that I do have a Simpsons reference and, building associations. If you're talking classic Simpsons, I can take any moment and find the Simpsons moment. So that I feel like is my background for like, there's some hope that if I learned other stuff besides Simpsons, I might be able to make those links.
I'm going to be honest with you. Like a lot of the memes, like some of the newer ones, like I don't even understand them. Like I'm like, what's the Rick and Morty stuff? I'm just like, dude, I don't know. I've never watched an episode of Rick and Morty.
It's too nihilistic, a lot of that stuff for me. So
I don't have time. I've got a job and I've got HTMX and a book and baseball. Like I don't have time to watch this stuff. And so, but you can still see like, you see a couple of memes of it and you're like, okay, I could take that and like modify it for my needs. And so that's the level that I'm at. I don't know. But it's the same exact process. There is no silver bullet. You just have to put in the time with memes.
Yep. Cruel news.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. Well, anything else? So you just released a book. I don't want to leave without promoting something. Besides, this whole podcast is a promotion of you and your work. Besides that, though, I want to make sure.
We did just release it's the same book as the Hypermedia Systems book, but it's in paperback or soft copy, whatever. But it's a new cover. So the new cover is kind of a pixel art, like
so good. I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited with it. And we paid an actual artist, like we actually gave an artist money to make the thing and all that. So I feel really good about it. I know some people expressed disappointment that we didn't use the one that US Graphics made, which is an unbelievable, like in my mind, like that was an unbelievable cover, but I just wanted to do something different so that the paperback had its own feel and get some we've built up a lot of lore, I guess lore is the term, in the HTMX community in the last year, and so I wanted something that kind of reflected that a little bit, and so I'm super happy with it. think
No,
you
I
always
thought
did a
I
great job.
thought it was really I thought it was really good. Fit the ethos. You had a little bit of the
Yeah.
pixel art at Big Sky DevCon, and I appreciated that. And
Yeah.
my kid just mentioned to me, and she's like, "Pixel art's my favorite." And this is
Yeah.
unrelated to HTMX. She plays a
Right.
lot of games, and she likes the
Yeah.
pixel art in the games.
Yeah, someone had a quote the other day, and this is the thing about like Twitter. It's so ridiculous, and then every once in a while, something just like punches you in the face. And it was like people. I'll paraphrase it, but the claim was that people like pixel art because it stops the infinite recursion of like reality. Like there's a final end to any unit. And so like okay, like
Well, and
it takes away that like infinite recursion that you're dealing with in life. Like everything like okay, what's going on over here? Oh my gosh, okay, what are the 10 things that, okay, now each one of those okay. It's just like okay, this is a piece of art and I look at it and like if I look at any one thing like it stops. And I was like, man,
yeah,
that's a pretty interesting idea to think about. So I
yeah,
love it. I
that's
love it.
funny.
I love isomorphic pixel art is my favorite. I'm
Yeah,
really
it's
into
such a cool
isomorphic.
aesthetic.
Yeah.
I actually have had like pretty fun experiences using ChatGPT to generate
Yeah.
pixel art, just like literally just for fun, not for
Yeah.
anything else. But I'm just like,
Yeah.
imagine this world, but in like isomorphic pixel art. And it's like, actually, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
it's just such a neat, like, I don't know. I love isomorphic. Like the icons, when I'm in charge of everything, like computers, we're going back to isomorphic icons that are like pixel art derived
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's just such a cool look and it's such a bummer that everything's so polished and flat now.
yeah.
But,
Man, I saw something the other day, and I don't even know if this is a real product or if it was just
hmm,
something fed to me because of, but it was a little glass cube, and I would say it was
yep,
about, that big.
yep,
And you hold it up to stuff, and it
yeah.
like morphs the light. Have you seen this? It
No, I
makes it
haven't.
so that whatever you hold it up to is pixel art in real
Okay.
life. So it's like the cube is like, and I was like, is this real? Like, does this
Is
actually
this
work?
chat?
But
Chat, is this real?
yeah. Yeah. But I
Yeah,
mean, it was like looked like a real physical like little piece of glass cube, and it just makes
interesting.
everything pixel art. So
That'd be
yeah, I'm
cool.
to
I mean,
find
I
that.
just, gosh, I love that. I don't know. It's all good. Maybe I'm just
Yeah.
old and nostalgic. You need to be nostalgia maxing. You're really like, oh, that's just nostalgia. Like, I don't know, man. Nostalgia. If you're gonna be nihilistic, nostalgia is as like reasonable a value as anything else. So, like,
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen the older generations, and they had some fun with nostalgia. They're still watching the movies, and
dude,
you
I
know.
still like old. Man, this is gonna degenerate into a long conversation. But, okay. I don't think there's like nostalgia. Saying something's nostalgic isn't the own that a lot of people think it is, in my opinion.
Yeah. Enjoy the things that just because you happen to, find them when
Well,
you were 13 doesn't make them bad.
yeah, and there's a craving for like permanence and like, like I think it hurts. Okay, this is like the last sort of philosophical point. Like it hurts especially in computer, well, maybe not especially in computer programming, but certainly in like architecture and like a lot of things like that. This like allergy to the past. It's just like, guys, like stop. It's okay. You don't have to reinvent everything every generation. Like, and even HTMX at some levels like this. Like, it's like I'm not reinventing the web. I'm just taking what was there and what was a good idea and adding a little bit to it, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to have that approach to life. Like, okay, So I don't know,
Yeah.
but maybe pixel art is not the best, not the best like road into this conversation. But I do, man, isometric pixel art. When I'm in charge, there's gonna be an awful lot of it. So
Yeah. I like it. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, if there's anything else you want to promote or whatever
no,
else, but yeah, I'm
I
good.
really, I appreciate you doing a whole podcast about HTMX.
No, it's
Hopefully
been a
this is
blast.
useful.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to come on regularly if you like. I don't know. We're gonna run out. The problem with HTMX is there's not a lot to it. So
No,
I
see,
don't,
yeah, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know if we're
I'm
gonna
I'm
run.
yeah, I've been having fun with the podcast and I haven't
Yeah.
even started on the extensions. So
Okay. Yeah.
we
There you
I
go.
got a ways to go with the
Okay.
podcast.
I
We're
like
not
it.
going anywhere. So
Well, then you could start looking at Hyperscript, and then you've got, you know,
Hyperscript, yep.
the number of bad decisions that were made in
Hyperview.
Hyperscript, Hyperview,
I'm gonna start going
Idi
mobile soon, so
yeah, Idiomorph. You can look at that. Like, there's definitely plenty of content, but yeah, again, I really appreciate you taking it, and running with it. So thank you.
No, I really appreciate you for coming on. Thank you very much. And, I've been enjoying the tools and everything. So,
Cool. Awesome, man. All right.
all right.